A senior U.S. military official says Russia still has 95% of its military force in Ukraine intact, more than enough to destroy the country's cities and create much more suffering.
Ukrainian officials this morning are once again expressing concern about the Chernobyl nuclear exclusion zone. Russian forces took over the area several days ago, and now Ukrainian officials say that they have cut off Chernobyl from the main power grid. Chernobyl still contains radioactive material, and Ukrainians say that not being connected to the power grid eliminates monitoring systems and protection systems that are in place. It's unclear if the Russians have brought in their own power to the site.
All right, Richard Engel, thank you so much.
This morning, we're hearing from a woman with a unique perspective on the war, former Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch. As a Foreign Service officer for more than 30 years, she served all over the world. She had stints in Moscow and London before taking on the role as U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine from 2016 to 19. She sat down exclusively with Today co-host Savannah Guthrie this morning to share her perspective.
Is the U.S. and the West, are we doing enough?
We are doing a lot, and we need to keep on doing more. And I think the administration and NATO are looking at what more can be done. There's unbelievable security assistance that is flowing to Ukraine. That is vital. Humanitarian assistance, economic assistance. And I think the administration and NATO do need to look at the possibility of a no-fly zone for humanitarian purposes.
Of course, they say that means you're walking into World War III. You're having a direct confrontation with Russia. What's the counter to that? I mean, everybody wants to help Ukraine,
right,
and everyone is terrified of a nuclear confrontation with Russia.
Right. So that is a real concern. But I also think that we cannot let Putin set the terms of this debate and have Putin decide how this is going to go.
Many have suggested that Putin won't stop with Ukraine, and that's really the bedrock of Ukraine's argument for more military intervention from the West, that if you don't stop him here, he's going to keep going.
And I think that's what we've seen over the last 2 decades, where Putin went into Georgia in 2008, Ukraine in 2014, got away with it, and thought he was going to get away with it again. And that was a huge miscalculation.
Is there an off-ramp for Putin? I mean, people talk about saving face or some kind of graceful exit. It's unclear whether he even cares about such things. But is there a way out of this?
I think there's always a way out. Diplomats are very optimistic always. And so the Ukrainians and the Russians are still talking. That's important. And obviously we are looking for ways to reach out. And when Putin is in the right place, I think there will be a way to conduct those negotiations. The Ukrainian people are, unruly. They love freedom. They're not going to let anybody tell them what to do, certainly not Putin. They're kind of like us in that sort of very independent way. And they have always been strong and independent. And I think you're seeing that now, that they're not going to give in. They're not going to give up.
Savannah Guthrie speaking this morning with Ambassador Yovanovitch.
Let's dig a little deeper into everything that you've just heard this morning with Joe Cirincione. He's a distinguished fellow at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft and a national security analyst. Joe, thank you so much for joining us. So first, I want to start with something that our viewers just heard at the end of Richard Engel's report there, and especially since you're a nuclear expert, I want to get your view on what we're seeing at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. So it was captured by Russia. Our viewers probably remember that. Well, this morning we're hearing, as Richard mentioned, from the Ukrainians that the plant has been fully disconnected from the power grid. Now, Ukraine's foreign minister has called on Russia to restore the power supply. This is tweets right here from him. Quote, reserve diesel generators have a 48-hour capacity to power Chernobyl. After that, cooling systems of the storage facility for spent nuclear fuel will stop, making radiation leaks imminent. I want to ask you about that. Putin's barbaric war puts entire Europe in danger. He must stop it immediately. What is your assessment about what's going on there? Are you concerned? Is some type of nuclear disaster, as this tweet says, imminent? Should this not be back on a power grid soon?
Yes, yes, and yes. This is an extremely dangerous situation. You remember that the Russian forces have seized 2 nuclear power facilities, Chernobyl, and then the 6 reactors that they stormed and took over as well just 5 days ago. We now have a situation where the electricity has been cut off at Chernobyl. Now, Chernobyl is not operating. It is not an operating facility. Anybody who lived through it or saw the HBO movie knows that one of the reactors exploded in the worst nuclear power disaster in history. The other 3 reactors, however, had their fuel removed, and that fuel is now stored in spent fuel ponds. But that fuel has to be kept cool, so water circulates through it. If the electricity has been cut off, that means that the plant and the coolant system is now operating on backup generators. The Ukrainian officials are telling us that those backup generators have enough fuel for about 48 hours under typical conditions. And of course, this is not typical conditions. So we may have 2 days in order to get that electricity back up before the pumps fail. If the pumps fail, that means those 20,000 fuel assemblies will start to superheat and melt down, exploding in the process, spewing radioactive material once again into the atmosphere.